right, a little bit about RMI. We are an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to transform global energy systems through market-driven solutions to ensure a clean, prosperous, zero carbon future for all. Great. I think we could go ahead and move on to the next slide. Great, thank you. And actually, let's just go ahead and go on to the speaker slide. Thank you. So today's webinar, it's 60 minutes long. After I'll be the moderator. Again, my name is Tom Frankowitz with RMI. I'm the principal for Waste Methane here. After a brief introduction from the Global Methane Hub, we'll be introducing you to WasteMAP, doing a live demo of some of its features. And then we'll have featured speakers from Carbon Mapper and Inter-American Development Bank as well. And as I mentioned, we will have a little bit of time at the end for Q&A, but as you have questions, please drop them into the Q&A feature. Okay, next, please. And our first speaker of the day is Taboga Malika. She is the program manager with the Global Methane Hub, and she's going to be setting the stage with the Global Methane Hub's vision for reducing methane from the waste sector. Taboga?
Thank you so much, Tom, for that introduction. It's such a privilege to represent the Global Methane Hub and share our vision for how we, will plan to use the innovative tools such as the WasteMAP to drive meaningful progress in the waste methane sector. Methane emissions from waste represent one of the most urgent, solvable challenges in the fight against climate change. Sorry for that. The launch of the WasteMAP features marks one of the pivotal moments in equipping local decision makers with the tools that they need to take concrete steps. I'm excited to divulge into how Global Methane Hub is aiming to support the WasteMAP and how this aligns with the broader mission to accelerate high-impact methane emissions. As we all know, anthropogenic methane emissions contribute extremely to global warming, making it the second largest driver of climate change after CO2. While the energy sector, primarily fossil fuels, production and distribution, accounts for about 40% of these cumulative emissions, agriculture follows closely with livestock decision and rice accumulation representing about 40%. What makes methane particularly concerning is its impact. It stays in the atmosphere for about 12 years compared to the centuries of CO2. Its near-term warming effect is more than 80 times percent more stronger, and the dual nature, both intensively potent and relatively short-lived, means methane reductions deliver rapid climate benefits. However, persistent challenges such as inconsistent monitoring, underpinning natural inventories, and competing sectoral priorities have slowed progress. The silver lining, however, is that this very potency makes methane emission one of our most powerful near-term climate levers. Next slide, please. When particularly looking at the waste sector alone, it accounts for 20% of global methane emissions. These emissions particularly come from organic decomposing anaerobically in landfill and wastewater treatment facilities. Without urgent action, global municipal solid waste emissions are projected to rise by 80% by 2050. This is driven by urban rapidization as well as population growth, mostly in the global south, where organic waste makes up 50% of the total municipal waste. About 70% of municipal waste in the global south is still decomposed, uncontrolled dump sites or landfills, often near marginalized communities, causing air pollution. Now, worsening with climate change, despite this, local governments responsible for waste management often lack the data and the financing and regulatory incentives to shift from basic disposal to integrated low-emission waste systems. Gaps in national methane inventories and limited access to actionable data hinder effective action as well as investment. Next slide, please. At the Global Methane Hub, our approach is rooted in a clear theory of change. We identify high leverage opportunities where strategic investments can catalyze systematic approach. Firstly, we fund and support innovative technologies like the WasteMAP decision support tool that bridges critical gaps in data and decision making. Secondly, we collaborate with multilateral development banks such as the IDB to ensure that these tools are integrated into real-world projects, financing, and pipelines. Thirdly, we prioritize equity by focusing on under-resourced regions where the need for methane mitigation is greatest, but the capacity to act is often limited. WasteMAP, for instance, amplifies the strategy. It decompromises access to actionable data, empowering cities, waste operators, and financiers to make informed decisions. For the Global Methane Hub, in supporting the WasteMAP, it was a natural choice because it aligns perfectly with our mission to accelerate accessible, replicable solutions that deliver measurable methane reductions. Next slide, please. The WasteMAP enhances capabilities to mark a transformative advancement in waste methane mitigation strategies. This platform's new site decision tool empowers stakeholders to conduct granular emissions assessments, as well as stimulate mitigation scenarios for individual waste disposal sites, a critical capability that was previously inaccessible to most local actors. Complemented by new user account features that enable scenarios comparison and knowledge sharing, these features represent more than technical improvements. They also establish fundamental infrastructure for transparent, accountable monitoring and evaluation systems aligned with global climate commitments. One thing is that the power of the WasteMAP is also amplified through strategic collaborations that we have with leading scientific institutions such as Carbon Mapper, ESRON, as well as the Clean Air Task Force. Those cutting-edge methane detection and monitoring technologies have helped us to enhance the platform's data accuracy and verification capabilities. Furthermore, integration with global initiatives such as the LOM, as well as the Subnational Methane Action Coalition, also known as SMAC, and Global Action Drive on Food Loss and Waste creates a comprehensive ecosystem for action, which also helps us in connecting policymakers, financiers, and implementers to accelerate solutions from policy reform to infrastructure investment. From development institutions such as the IDB, this collaboration has also advanced analytic scientific partnerships and multilateral networks, which provide an unprecedented framework for targeting climate-smart investments, where they'll deliver maximum impact. Together, we are establishing a new paradigm for methane mitigation, one that bridges both technical innovation with on-the-ground implementation to drive measurable as well as scalable emissions reductions worldwide. Last slide, please. So as we look to the future, the Global Methane Hub envisions a world where tools like the WasteMAP move from pilot projects to more standardized positions, enabling every stakeholder from local governments to global finances to take targeted, effective action to waste methane. Our goal is to see this tool integrated into routine decision-making processes, which ensure that methane mitigation is both measurable and scalable. The path ahead requires continued collaboration, innovation, and commitment to all of us. To close, I'd like to say that data, no matter how advanced it is only as powerful as the action it enables. Let's work together to ensure that the WasteMAP and similar tools translate into real-world methane reduction benefits into communities and the climate. Thank you.
Excellent stage setting, Tebogo. Thank you. Next slide, please. And then next. Thank you. Fast action to reduce global warming is critical, and methane is a critical piece of that picture. I assume a lot of you know something about methane already if you're here. And so you may know that methane has over 80 times the global warming potential of CO2 in a 20-year time frame. But also because it has a relatively short lifespan that roughly overlaps with the same time frame as the global methane pledge, it's essential that we lean in on methane in these next 10 years, not only to meet that pledge, but because it also complements this critical decade for staying within 1.5 degrees Celsius. Simply put, we cannot meet our global climate goals, individual goals, or even corporate goals in the next 10 years without also reducing methane at the same time. Next. But there's critical barriers for achieving our goals. While a lot of these barriers could probably easily apply to any sector, what's unique about waste is that there's a lack of a common source of truth or a common fact base to work from. There's many barriers impeding policy enabling environments and a general lack of access to capital. When the Global Methane Pledge was launched, we collaborated with our partners at the Clean Air Task Force to design WasteMAP. One of the first challenges that we identified was that many countries did not have a full picture of emissions from this sector. And that's everything from knowing where the dump sites were located, their emissions profile, which mitigation actions to take, and the benefit that can be achieved from taking them. Next. WasteMAP addresses these critical barriers and empowers decision makers. WasteMAP empowers stakeholders by providing a common fact base on emissions from this sector, a decision support tool to support policy design and deployment. And I want to highlight some of these key elements and key successes really from since the launch of WasteMAP at COP28 just 2 years ago. With its launch, for the first time, a platform combined modeled emissions, inventory, and satellite data to provide global emissions, providing baselining and at the national and subnational levels. The platform aggregates emissions data from over 200 countries, 300 cities, and almost 10,000 landfills and dump sites throughout the world and counting. And as Tobogo mentioned, one of the features of WasteMAP, not just as a platform, but also as a hub, it provides, it relies on collaboration through partners, both for data and for deploying actions. We work with the Subnational Methane Action Coalition, the Inter-American Development Bank, and the Lowering Organic Waste Methane Initiative, just to name a few, as entities that are able to use this data and achieve wide-scale methane action. Next. One of the things that makes WasteMAP so powerful is the data we've integrated at multiple levels. Site data from Climate Trace, modeled city data from What a Waste and WasteWise cities, and satellite plumes from SRON and Carbon Mapper, and a decision support tool adapted from US EPA's SWEET model. My colleague Rose will be going into much greater detail of these features with an emphasis on updates for 1.5. But I wanted to show a snapshot here so you can get a sense both of the levels of data and how the site is organized. Next. And finally, WasteMAP provides a platform to empower action, whether through a wealth of resources, including our Global Strategic Playbook, or our direct country engagement with our partners at Cleaner Task Force. We're working in Latin America, Southeast Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa. This slide highlights some of the ways that we're working with countries directly to help them meet their goals. Conducting regulatory barrier analysis to help countries close down their dump sites, assessing economic viability of projects for organics diversion, treatment with things like compost anaerobic digestion for biogas, and working in partnership with local partners, organizing workshops with national and subnational waste officials to build capacity. And with that, I will hand it off to my colleague, Rose Wang, next, the software product development manager for RMI. Rose?
Thank you, Tom, and thank you all for joining the webinar. We're excited to share a number of updates in this release of WasteMAP. Next slide, please. First, it's a site-level decision support tool, or Site DST, to simulate mitigation options and cut methane at disposal sites. Second, user accounts to save, edit, and track mitigation scenarios. Third, an improved city-level DST with a new food waste prevention slider. Last but not least, expanded satellite data layer with over 3,000 methane plumes now visible. Now I'm going to share my screen. Thank you. Let's start with the site-level decision support tool. You can click this link, Site Decision Support Tool, on the home page to get to the DST to create a custom site if the site is not already modeled in WasteMAP. The way to do that is simply entering the latitude and longitude of the site. And with that information, WasteMAP will pre-populate the baseline data we have for that location, including the degradation rate for a disposal site at that location. And you can also populate other waste data for the site of your interest. Another way to access the site-level DST is through the map. I'm going to search a site called Alusason dump site to show you how we can use this to model a dump site decommissioning scenario. Alusason is one of the largest dump sites in Lagos, Nigeria, where Anamai's country engagement team has collaborated with the local authority to advance its methane emissions reduction goals. As you can see, this site info card shows several critical informations about emissions and also waste for this site. For Arushasan, WasteMAP also hosts plume observations from Esron's Choose Initiative GHG set data and as well as carbon mapper data. These plumes average around 1.7 tons per hour, or equivalent to about 15,300 tons per year. To enter the site DST tool for Alusasan, we can click the Decision Support Tool button, which brings us to a page where the baseline inputs for the site is pre-populated with data from our database. The site DST is laid out with baseline inputs on the left with orange font and scenario modeling on the right with blue font. As you can see, the satellite-derived annualized emission of 15,300 tons per year match closely with the modeled baseline for 2023 to 2024 using our backend model, which is adapted from EPA's suite model. Let's model a decommissioning scenario. We know Alushasan is scheduled for decommissioning in 2027. To do that, let's enter 2027 as a site closure year in the scenario column. Sorry, it should be here, 2027. You see the emissions curve drop significantly after 2027 once the site stops receiving waste. The site DST helps quantify the impact of this planned action for Alushasan. Now let's look at Nevoto's landfill. Nevoto's landfill is located in the Philippines, and we're using this as a second example to show how we can simulate implementing a gas collection and control system for a landfill. Like Alushasan, for Nevotos, we have plume observations from Carbon Mapper and Esrom. These observations suggest an annualized emission of approximately 27,000 tons. While just 2 plume detections may not fully capture the true emissions during this period, they still provide a valuable order of magnitude check against the modeled baseline emissions. Since I already saved this site in my dashboard, I'm going to enter it directly from my dashboard. To do that, I click this user account on the top right corner of my screen and entering my dashboard and selecting Nevotos GCCS, which is a scenario that I have previously saved. As you can see, we've filled the baseline data for this scenario, including waste amount data, waste growth rate, waste composition, site type, opening year, depth, etc. A point to note is that this site currently doesn't have gas capturing system installed. So if we were to model the GCCS system, assuming a GCCS system is to be installed in 2030, and we can select gas capture, gas to energy from this drop-down menu, you can see a significant drop in emissions from this baseline, business as usual, to the scenario. We can further adjust this slider to see what if the system, the GCCS system efficiency is much higher than like 50%. Further reduction can be seen from this curve. A point also to note is that we've noted the satellite observation of 27,000 tons per year, and the baseline that we created for this site is more or less on the same order of magnitude for this period. This again emphasizes the usefulness of satellite data in setting the baseline right for the sites in terms of methane emissions. The third scenario I would like to showcase is the impact of biocover on emissions. Let's select this dump site near Fortaleza, a city in Brazil, as an example. Again, I have modeled this site specifically, so I'm quickly going to the biocover toggle. So if we were to put a biocover starting this year on this site, let's see what is the impact on its emission. The way to do that is simply choose yes to it. And the default oxidation rate for the site we set is 60% for the biocover. This is the amount of mitigation that we can see for this site if a biocover is implemented starting from 2025. Now let's go back to the user dashboard. A feature I'd like to highlight is that if you choose yes on this drop-down menu, the data you entered for the site will be shared with WasteMAP team. We'll follow up with you to validate data sources, and by contributing data, you will help us improve the platform's overall data accuracy. In addition to the newly released site DST, we've also improved the city DST, which models mitigation opportunities earlier in the waste value chain during generation and diversion phases. Let's look at Rio de Janeiro, which has set an ambitious goal of reducing food waste by 50% by 2030. And enter the decision support tool for Rio. So the way to model the policy impact for the food waste reduction policy is to select the scenario start year as 2030, and then slide the food waste prevention toggle to reduce 50% of the food waste. This is the impact that we can see from that policy specifically. As you can see, the City DST tool is especially useful for city and state decision makers to model policy pathways, such as composting and recycling programs, anaerobic digestion projects, or building a new sanitary landfill with an efficient gas capturing and control system. The last feature update I would like to mention is a satellite layer on the map. We've made satellite observation data more accessible. Sites with observational data are now marked with a satellite icon and a darker orange symbol for quick identification. This is also reflected in the icons of the search dropdown, as you probably already saw. Sites with satellite observation is marked with a darker orange circle here. This helps users locate sites with rich observational data, like Alushasan, and use that data to validate or adjust modeled baseline emissions. We know there's still a lot of work to be done to reconcile top-down observational data and bottom-up modeled emissions estimates. We are eager to collaborate with our partners to push this forward. With that, I'm wrapping up the demo of our new features. I'd like to sincerely thank the entire WasteMAP team for your tireless work and dedication. This feature release wouldn't have been possible without your efforts. I'd also like to extend our deep appreciation to the beta testers whose thoughtful feedback helped us refine and strengthen the tool, and to our front-end development partners at Earth Genome for your creativity and collaboration. Finally, a heartfelt thank you to our funders, GMH and Google.org, for your generous support in making this work possible. Your contributions have been instrumental in bringing this to life. With that, I'm handing the mic back over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you for the excellent demonstration and also for the gratitude. I'll just echo that and say that, WasteMAP is not just an accumulation of data. It's an accumulation of resources and partners that we've worked with that have really made it a powerful tool. Next, I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Tia Scarpelli the waste sector lead with Carbon Mapper, and she's going to talk about how remote observation specifically, how it is a powerful tool for shining a light on emissions from this sector. Tia?
Thanks so much, Tom. And hi, everyone. Good morning. Well, to those of you who it's morning for. As Tom said, I'm going to be just talking a bit about the satellite data. That's one piece of the WasteMAP platform. Next slide, please. And so, for those of you who haven't heard of us before, so I'm the waste lead at Carbon Mapper. We build and deploy and then also provide insights for remote sensing data. So this can be on satellites or on airplanes. And we specifically focus on what we call methane super emitters. So landfills and dump sites can be these methane super emitters. These are large emission sources from a facility on the ground. So on the right image here, I'm just showing an example of a landfill in Mexico City that is a super emitter. And part of the reason why we focus on these super emitters is that they can be large emission sources, and so they are highly actionable for mitigation because it's a small number of facilities that have this huge mitigation potential when it comes to methane emissions. And we especially find that for landfills and dump sites, like those on the WasteMAP platform, they can be highly persistent sources of methane emissions. And so there's really that high mitigation potential. We also find that, by reducing these methane emissions, because there is often co-pollutants emitted with the methane, you can have health benefits by reducing those emissions. Next slide, please. And so just a little bit of background on the data for those of you who are less familiar with it. And so this is, as I said, remote sensing instruments. This means they're in the sky or in space, and they're observing methane coming from, we specifically focus on facility scale. So this is a methane emission coming from a specific facility. Could be an oil and gas facility, could be a landfill or a dump site. And we detect that source. So we say, is there methane coming from it or is there not? And then we also quantify its emissions. And the methodologies for these are published in scientific literature. So over a decade of research going into these methods of how do we detect and quantify these sources. And we also have validation of this work through third parties. We do these experiments called controlled release experiments where we can release a known amount of methane and then observe it with our instruments and verify that we're accurately getting the emission rate correct. And the satellite data is especially important because it has this global coverage and because we still maintain that high sensitivity and high spatial resolution. So you're getting global coverage of facility scale information, which is really needed to do that mitigation on the ground. And just the images here are just giving examples of what this data looks like. The black and white one is just what the methane concentration looks like. And then the bottom kind of more rainbow image is what we call a methane plume. And then we also mark the kind of location of where the source is that's creating this methane plume. And so it's an instantaneous snapshot in time of methane coming from a facility. Next slide, please. And so this is just what what our data looks like if you go to our data portal. And so as kind of was noted earlier, WasteMAP is really this focus on waste. So you can actually filter this data by sector. And so if you just want to look at landfills and dump sites, you can filter this to waste. We also have data from other sectors like oil and gas, and some smaller amount from the agricultural sector. And so here you see that these are kind of clumped by region, but we have methane and CO2 plumes for these large super emitting sources globally. We have over 20,000 methane and CO2 plumes here. On the waste side, we have over 50 countries globally, and feel free to let me know if you have any questions on this. But then I'm really going to focus in on the waste data. Next slide, please. So this is just showing a zoomed in example over the country of Mexico. And so you can kind of filter by region as well if you want to get some more aggregate statistics. So on the bottom, I'm just showing some different examples of information that you can pull here. On the bottom left is just aggregating those super emitters by sector and kind of saying like, what is the highest contributing sector in my region of interest? And so the yellow here is oil and gas, and then the brown in that bar is waste. So we see that for Mexico, we're actually seeing the most super emitters from the solid waste sector. So this is mostly landfills. You can also click on a particular facility and look at the time series over time of what emissions are doing as detected by the satellite or the airplane. Most of the global data is going to be from the satellites. You can also go and assess leaks. And so saying if something was mitigated, if we are able to observe it before and after, you can see that change in emissions. Next slide, please. And so the really important next step is, okay, how do we translate this data to action? And so there are kind of two main buckets that we think about of how we can translate this data to action. The first one is doing that find and fix, where we see a leak and we want to get the data to someone who can go and fix it. And so this is really direct mitigation. On the top right, I'm just showing an example of doing this at a landfill in California, where the data we were able to observe this emission from a landfill, get the information to the operator, and we had support from the local enforcement agency. And then the operators were able to make changes at the site, and we were able to re-observe the site and verify that change that was made actually did reduce emissions. So we can track these emissions from these high emitting facilities and get that information to operators or regulators who can go and fix it. In some cases too, we're able to use this information to verify. The second bucket of how we translate data to action is using insights to support policy decisions, best practices, and reporting structures. And this might be like, for those of you who are familiar with measurement, monitoring, reporting, and verification systems, or MMRV, this can be through kind of improving inventories and models used for reporting. The bottom left image is just showing an example of doing this for reporting structures in the US at landfills, and kind of doing this intercomparison. As Rose mentioned earlier, we have this desire to reconcile the model data that we get for landfills with observational data. And so saying at what sites do we see disagreement, and how can we adjust the model to fix that? And then this is also using our scientific insights. So Carbon Mapper has a large science team where we publish scientific papers. We did a paper last year on looking at what are some of the major activities that lead to emissions at landfills in the US. Finding that the work face, or the area where fresh waste is added to the site, was actually a really large source of these super emitter methane emissions. And so using that information then to engage with policymakers and those folks and experts in the industry who are defining best practices. Next slide, please. So then just want to high level walk through a couple examples of how someone could think about feeding this in. We're kind of merging the tools of the satellite observations with a platform like WasteMAP. So this is just an example of doing it at the jurisdiction level, of starting with the satellite data in step one on the left and thinking about, okay, with the satellite, where am I seeing those highest priority mitigation opportunities at the jurisdiction level? So on the left is the bar chart for countries. Where do we see the most super emitters in the waste sector by country? And then on the center is the bar chart, the lighter blue, for cities. Where do we see the cities with the most super emitters in the waste sector? And so then once we're kind of identifying just high level where are these opportunities at, you can go to a tool like the City Decision Support tool in WasteMAP and saying, okay, now what's my next step? I know that the city is a high priority, but what can I do to address those emissions? Next slide, please. And so this is another example of doing this more at the facility scale. So again, starting in step one with the satellite data and saying, okay, what facilities do I see where there's this key mitigation opportunity globally? And then on the bottom of that map is just showing some example plumes. So these are the methane emissions and that instantaneous snapshot of these landfills globally. And so we can identify, okay, where do we see the highest emission at facilities with the satellites so far? And so that's what this map is showing. And then once we've identified those facilities, if we know that there are partners who can engage with the city and engage with the operators, they can go and use the WasteMAP site decision support tool, which Rose was just modeling earlier, to say, okay, what's my next step? I know this facility is a high priority. What can I do in terms of best practices to reduce emissions at this particular site? Next slide. And then I think just another example of how we can kind of work together between the satellite data and the WasteMAP platform is thinking more high level on just best practices. So as I said, with the satellite data, one thing that our science team is working on continuously is how do we feed into inventories and models, and how do we feed into policy best practices. And so using information like what we get from Carbon Mapper, we'll put out science papers that say, hey, we see this disagreement between these inventories and the observational data. And then we see that by identifying those major emitting sources, like the landfill work face where that fresh waste is added, we can inform, which is in step 2, these models that are underlying platforms like WasteMAP. And so it's really this reconciliation process of taking the scientific results from a partner like Carbon Mapper and then feeding that into platforms like WasteMAP, and how do we improve our ability to accurately track emissions from mitigation over time by using this reconciliation tool between the satellite observations and the underlying models. Next slide. And so here, just noting that kind of that data to action gap can be a big one. And so I think we kind of see this as a key step of working with partners. And so Carbon Mapper works with partners kind of at the national, subnational scale, and then also with public and private industry, operators of sites, and then also partners like RMI in the WasteMAP team through a coalition like the Low Methane Coalition. And really it's key there because, we need to, that gap of kind of we see these large opportunities for mitigation, but how do we then actually get action on the ground? So it really takes all of these partners working together to achieve that. Next slide. I just want to end here with just saying that if you have any questions or want to take a look at the satellite data yourself, you're free to. These are some resources here. We just put out a thought piece on globally what we're seeing from waste, and there's some content in there just kind of talking through again, how do you link this data with the WasteMAP platform, if anyone has questions on how to do that. So I'll throw it back to Tom.
Thanks so much, Tia. Excellent insight. And I'll just point out there's a lot of great resources on Carbon Mapper's site, and it goes beyond the waste sector, so it covers methane more broadly. Next, we're going to have Magda Coriel speak. She's a senior specialist in the Water and Sanitation Division at IDB, and she's going to provide their perspective in Latin America on waste methane priorities and some potential application of the WasteMAP platform. Magda?
Thank you, Tom. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure being here. I want to share with you, as Tom already mentioned, the part of the work that we are doing currently in the region, in Latin America and the Caribbean, as a multilateral development bank. Next, please. So I want to share just a couple of figures related about to describe the current context of the waste management in the region. Just to have in mind, in the region, generates around 230 million tons of municipal solid waste per year, and only 5% is recovered. The rest is, half of this fraction is disposed inadequately, and the rest is disposed in landfills. And most of these landfills don't have capture systems or biogas capture systems. Next, please. And also why it's very, very important to work in our region in methane mitigation in the waste management sector is because around 60% of the waste, of municipal solid waste, is organic. That goes to the landfills or to the dump sites and decomposes and produces this methane. So as you can see in this paper from Science, it remarks that we have to work in our region in Latin America and the Caribbean. The priority should be working on the mitigation of methane in the solid waste management sector. Next, please. So just to let you know, to describe briefly the work that we do in the region, we are a multilateral development bank. We work specifically in 26 countries of Latin America and the Caribbean. And Our core activities are providing financing through a loan portfolio, also providing technical cooperation and developing initiative, and creating a new knowledge related to the development in the region. Next, please. So in general, the IDB every year approves in average 10 billion in financing in loan operations, and specifically in the water and sanitation and the solid waste management sector, we approve in average 1 billion per year. Next, please. And specifically in the solid waste sector, currently we have 14 active loan operations that totals around 700 million in 11 countries. And we are providing technical cooperations. Most of them are non-reimbursable, that equals around 16 million in 25 cooperations. Next, please. I want to show just one example, that is La Duquesa. This is a large dam site in Dominican Republic. We approved a couple of years ago, we approved a loan operation to progressively close this place. And we are starting the execution of this operation. To clarify, we are the supervisors of the loan execution, and the government of Dominican Republic, through the Ministry of Environment, they execute the loan. I want to remark that with the support of the Global Methane Hub and ESRUM, we are gathering information during the last 2 years. We have been gathering information using satellites to estimate the current emissions in the dam site, and we will measure how the execution and the investments that will be done with the loan will impact or will mitigate or avoid or reduce these emissions in this landfill. Next, please. I want to share with you, probably most of them, most of you know the call for proposals that we launched last year. We selected 16 projects, or we are working right now in the Too Good to Waste initiative, 16 projects in different cities. And what I want to remark is that there is a large or a huge interest in the region for working on improving the solid waste management in different cities and countries. Next, please. This is just one example. We are starting a collaboration with the municipality of Quito. They want to implement a new environmental complex to replace the current landfill, to introduce valorization technologies, and we will support the preparation of this project. Next, please. So I want to move to talk about the digital transformation and how we agree with RMI, with Carbon Mapper, and with all the people that present me, that we agree about that data is essential to improve the solid waste management and to mitigate the methane emissions. So we are managing the hub, the Solid Waste and Circular Economy Data Hub. It is available since 2023. And next, please. And you can find information about what is the current context of the solid waste management, what is the amount of waste that is generated in every country, and many other resources. Next, please. And I want to highlight also that you can find the information related to the national information systems that are available in some of the countries of the region, like Brazil, Colombia, etc. And that we are gathering, every year we are gathering information from the official entities about the generation and the management of the solid waste. Next, please. And this year, we expect to deliver the HERS rating. This is a tool that would help the operators and the municipalities on improving their performance about the solid waste management, not only in technical matters and operational matters, but also in terms of management, in terms of financial and organizational topics that are super relevant and that are, in most cases are barriers to improve the solid waste management. And just a couple of slides more. Next, please. So today I want to highlight the work and the collaboration that we are doing with RMI and other institutions on working together and sharing information and to help the countries and the cities in the region to improve and to take decisions based on data. Next, please. And as part of this collaboration, just to highlight that we find this new tool that Rose presented today very useful. I was trying, for example, of doing a kind of exercise, working on La Duquesa, analyzing different alternatives. What happened, or what if we implement different alternatives, what is the impact on mitigating the methane emissions? And last slide, please. Next. So just to conclude, I want to remark that landfills in Latin America and the Caribbean are crucial on this methane climate action, that governments across the region are ready to act, but they need to strengthen their capacities and to get access to better sustainable financing and enabling policies to turn projects into impact. We, as IDB group, we are providing we are supporting this transformation through providing financing, expertise, and technical support. And finally, just to remark that we find in these alliances with RMI, with WasteMAP, and other institutions very strategic to move forward and to foster the actions in this sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Magda. Really insightful, really appreciate it. And we've actually right on time. One of the great things about working with a group of sharp data folks is we almost always stay on time. Since you're still queued up as the speaker, Magda, I might start with you. I know that IDB's been a really strong advocate for digital transformation and waste in the circular economy with your own platform. How do you see kind of your platform working with and complementing WasteMAP and vice versa? And are there opportunities for other MDBs to embed, digital MRV tools like WasteMAP and like yours into project design and financing pipelines? How can these hubs be used to actually help countries at the project design stage?
Thank you, Tom, for your question. I think the example that I presented about La Duquesa and about Dominican Republic is explain how we can work together and how we can use these kind of tools. And of course, I agree that we can still do a lot of things. Looking for the presentation of Carbon Mapper, for example, and thinking about the tool that Rose presented, we were thinking, and we were talking with my team about the possibility of comparing the information, the results of the ESRON satellites information, this tool that you developed, and also other tools that we are working internally in the IDB. And it is very useful to identify solutions, thinking not only in the waste management improvement, but also how we can of how these solutions can impact or positively impact in the methane reduction. So I think we have been working progressively in this collaboration, and I think it's very useful to move forward and taking action.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a great example. I think that's one of the big changes I've seen, especially in the waste space, moving from tracking what's already happened to kind of empowering action on the ground. And that's a great example. Next, I'm going to go to Tia, and just maybe, you covered some of this in your presentation already, but I was hoping you could maybe go a little bit deeper and talk about some of the challenges that you face in linking satellite methane observations with on-the-ground waste sector data. I know, kind of connecting the dots there is always a challenge, and you've put a lot of effort into that. So, what are some of the challenges that you face, and some of the ways you've tried to overcome that?
Yeah. Um, I think, yeah, as you pointed out, and as I point out in the slides, that really is the key step, and often the barrier to action is, okay, we're just pointing to a bunch of problems, but no one's presenting a solution. So I think that is why it's so important to work with partners like the WasteMAP team. Um, I think for us, and this was also asked in the Q&A, that these satellite observations are a snapshot in time. And so often it's not necessarily like for reporting structures, for example, they're reporting an annual emission rate. And so they're like, well, okay, you've got a snapshot in this one point in time. How do I then translate that to something that's relevant to me, which is an annualized reporting emission rate? And so I think really connecting it to the site level data on the ground is where that's really valuable, and it's going to fill in those time gaps. And so to Rose's point earlier too, of there's this process of reconciliation where we have seeing the satellite observations as a tool. And they're one tool that can help inform these underlying models for reporting structures for the WasteMAP platform. And so seeing them as if we see this snapshot in time that's disagreeing with the underlying models, where can we use the site level underlying information, like if there's gas collection data for the landfill, if there's activity information about how much waste is coming in per day, to say, okay, well, maybe on my model, maybe there's an uncertainty in that data. And so if I know where it's most uncertain, I can make an adjustment to my model that will bring it in reconciliation with the satellite observation. So it's kind of this back and forth between what am I seeing with the satellite? What am I seeing with the model? Where are there potentially uncertainties? And using the site level information to help understand that. So I think that's one aspect of it. I think another aspect of it is using the site level information to identify where there are opportunities to mitigate. And so there's often cases where we don't often work on the ground, and so we rely on communication with folks like operators who can go out and do that follow-up. So if we see a large super emitting plume, we can say, hey, we saw this. Do you know what was going on? And so really having that chain of communication and really using tools like the WasteMAP platform to help people lower the barriers to understanding the satellite data. I think that's also another one that's, everyone has pieces of information that are important. And so if we can just understand those different pieces of information and get everyone on the same page, that really helps bridge that gap between data to action.
Yeah, great answer. And I'll just say, having had the pleasure of working with you directly and Carbon Mapper more broadly, I think that speaks to both the really kind of when people talk about reconciliation all the time and top down, bottom up. There's some really complicated parts with algorithms and calculations that you are much more adept at, but there's also kind of the human side of working in partnership, working with operators on the ground, working with a variety of organizations. That's kind of the retail, and in some ways more complicated human aspect of integration. And I think you all handle that really well. Last but not least, I have a question for Rose, the manager for the WasteMap platform. Maybe you could speak to what's next for WasteMap, and not just kind of features, but particularly as new data becomes available, and there's a lot of new satellite data coming online, but also different data sets from cities, and we've gotten questions in the Q&A period about data that's missing. How do we get better data for my city? Why is there data missing for Kosovo? I'm sorry, I'm trying to read the questions as you've been posting them. How do WasteMAP accommodate that as it becomes available, and how does it adapt over time to improve decision making and emissions modeling?
Thank you, Tom. So I think we can see the next steps as near term, medium term and long term vision. For the near term, as Tia mentioned, top-down, bottom reconciliation is really very important so that we can trust these models for decision support. If we can't compare the baseline emissions from the model with observations, then the model is not trustworthy. So the first critical step is to do the reconciliation so we can get this model right for decision support. And in terms of medium term, I think we want to keep getting more data from different locations. For example, Kosovo, if we can have more data points from the local partners to populate on WasteMAP, we can be better in informing the inventory for different countries. So more data, more granular data, more waste-specific granular data will be very critical as next step for WasteMAP. And we are eager to work with partners on that. And this year, particularly, WasteMAP team, as will be leading the sectoral data for climate trace, the solid waste sector data. So we will be releasing a new data set in October for the waste sector, and that is asset level emissions data, and we will update the entire asset level data layer on WasteMAP as well at that time. So in terms of medium term, I think there is this scale up needed, both horizontally and vertically, for the kind of work that we are doing with low M. In low M, Carbon Mapper, IDB, and all of these NGO partners, we have collaborated to farm up data solutions strategy. Tom, if you could put the link to the data solutions in the chat, that would be great. So this strategy aims to help the jurisdictions on the ground to bridge the gap between data and action. So with all those data, satellite data, model data, how we can use those data to actually implement a mitigation project on the ground. And we have pilot 3 cases, Santo Domingo, Rio. Sorry, I'm blanking out on the 3rd case, but the goal in the medium term is to scale up these low M projects vertically in terms of how we can actually get the finance right for these projects so that actual mitigation can happen on those sites. So that's vertical scaling, and horizontal scaling is how we can get as many cities, as many sites to sign up to these kind of initiative, to commit mitigation and to eventually implement mitigation projects.
Great.
So that is the medium term. And I know, Tom, in the long term, you have the big vision of using WasteMAP as the NDC platform, which maybe we can leave for the future webinars.
Yeah, that's a great segue. And we are right at time. We've put up a poll just to get a better sense of some of the folks that get a better sense of who our audience is. We've got great participation on this call. Please fill that out. We also just put up our thank you page. We're recording this webinar, as I mentioned. We'll be sending out a recording within the next 24 hours. For anyone who registered, you could also scan the QR code here, which will just take you to the events page. So it'll be sent out in an email. You could find it on your own. It'll be up on our events page for the future. And my contact information is here. I know we flashed on the screen contact information of the speakers as well. We've got a wealth of resources here. Please feel free to reach out to any of us. And we really appreciate your participation, and please stay tuned. There's a lot of work to be done and a lot of great features coming out. Thanks so much, everyone.